Welcome to the TOEFL Listening section. In this section, you will listen to an academic lecture and then answer questions about what you heard. You may take notes while you listen. You will have time to review your notes before answering the questions. Listen to part of a lecture in a university class. You will hear the lecture only once, so listen carefully. After the lecture, you will answer some questions about what you heard. Some questions ask about the main ideas and supporting details. Other questions ask you to make inferences or connections between ideas. Answer each question based on what is stated or implied in the lecture.
Today we will focus on the decline of the Roman Empire, and especially on the economic and military factors that contributed to its collapse. I want you to think of decline not as a single event, but as a long process in which economic stress and military breakdown reinforced each other. Let us begin with economics. One central issue was coinage debasement during the 3rd century, which produced persistent inflation. Emperors facing fiscal emergencies reduced the silver content in coins to pay soldiers and bureaucrats. That provided short-term cash, but it eroded trust in the currency and raised prices everywhere. A concrete example is the rapid debasement between 250 and 270. By the time of the crisis of the 3rd century, the denarius had become almost worthless in daily transactions. Inflation had direct military consequences. When soldiers were paid in debased coin, their real wages fell. That reduced morale and loyalty and encouraged mutinies and stronger demands from the army. When I say that coinage debasement undermined soldiers' pay and loyalty, I mean that money lost purchasing power, which made soldiers less willing to serve. Taxes were another problem. The tax base shrank as landowners avoided fiscal burdens and as farmland productivity fell in some regions. Large estates known as latifundia expanded in some areas, which displaced smallholders and reduced the number of free farmers who traditionally supplied soldiers and local tax revenue. Trade disruption also mattered. The Rhine and Danube frontiers saw less secure commerce because of raids and instability. When trade declined, customs and port revenues dropped. Diocletian attempted economic reform, including a price edict and reorganization of taxation. These measures show imperial awareness of the problem, but they were unevenly enforced and often created new distortions. Now turning to the military side. One major issue was manpower and recruitment. The empire could not consistently recruit the number of legionaries it once could. Repeated civil wars drained available troops and resources. Rival generals diverted legions to internal struggle rather than border defense. A decisive episode that illustrates military weakness is the Battle of Adrianople in 378, where Roman forces were defeated by Gothic federates. That defeat cost the life of an emperor and exposed weaknesses in Roman tactics. Another important development was the growing reliance on foederati and barbarian mercenaries. The empire granted land and status to allied groups in exchange for military service. This policy provided troops but also eroded central control, because these groups pursued their own interests and could turn against imperial authorities. The sack of Rome in 410 by the Visigoths is a case study in symbolic loss. The city was not the imperial capital for centuries, but its fall signaled that imperial power had weakened enough that barbarian armies could penetrate central Italy. We should also note structural links between economy and military policy. High military costs pressured the state to extract more taxes and to debase coinage. That, in turn, worsened recruitment and loyalty. Finally, reforms such as those by Diocletian and Constantine produced temporary stability. Yet they did not fully resolve the fiscal and recruitment problems, and in the West, the cumulative pressures eventually overcame imperial capacity. In summary, the decline of the Roman Empire was driven by interconnected economic and military failures, including coinage debasement, loss of tax base, trade disruption, recruitment shortages, civil war, and reliance on barbarian forces. Understanding these mechanisms helps us see why the fall unfolded over centuries and varied across regions rather than as a single sudden catastrophe.
Listen again to part of a lecture, then answer the question.
When I say that coinage debasement undermined soldiers' pay and loyalty, I mean that money lost purchasing power, which made soldiers less willing to serve.
This concludes the listening section. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit spinta.org.